I'm Ethan Sullivan, 28 years old, and in my life, I've always been the one in the shadows. Raised in a house that looked perfect on the outside, wealthy, with a polished front that everyone admired, I was still the invisible one. My mother, Mary, did her best to hold everything together after my dad left. But when she remarried Daniel, everything changed. Daniel wasn't just controlling, he was suffocating, a manipulator in ways I never fully understood until now. I never mattered to him. I wasn't the son he wanted, and I didn't have the career successes of my older siblings. But I always protected my mother. Even if she didn't see it, I was the one keeping her grounded in a world that didn't care about her. Tonight was different. As I came home from work early, expecting an uneventful evening, I heard voices, low, hushed voices, coming from the kitchen. At first, I thought it was just another one of Daniel's endless business calls. But there was something about the tone that sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't place it. Something was off. I crept closer, the floorboards creaking under my weight. And then I heard it. "Soon, she won't be a problem," Daniel's voice whispered, the words like a knife in my chest. "She's getting too weak. The shed will do fine. The sooner she's gone, the better." I froze. A bead of sweat rolled down my neck as I pressed my back to the wall. My mother, my sweet, trusting mother, was being set up for something unimaginable. Daniel wasn't just planning to abandon her, he was planning to lock her away, isolate her, and leave her with nothing but the shadows of the shed. For the first time in my life, I felt fear, real and raw. I had always known Daniel was a cold man, but this was something else entirely. I could hear the faint sound of him pacing, the scrape of his shoes against the floor, as if he knew I'd been listening. And that's when I realized he was in control of everything. The house. The money. My mother. But not anymore. I had to stop this. I had to do it now before it was too late. I darted across the hallway, my heart pounding, and pressed my ear against the door to my mother's room. There was a sudden silence. And then, I heard her voice, soft and tired, as if she'd never known. "I trust him, Ethan. He's just trying to protect us. This is all for our future." My stomach twisted. She was blind to it all. I needed to act fast. I had to move quickly. The worst part? I wasn't sure how much time I had before it was too late. Daniel was ahead of me at every turn, always a step closer to destroying the one thing I loved most. I glanced at my phone. The clock was ticking. The weight of my next move felt like it could break me. But I wasn't backing down. The first thing I did was check the bank account. A dozen small, recurring transfers from my mother's account to an unknown offshore account. Not just a few $100s. Thousands. It was happening now. I locked my phone screen and turned back toward the kitchen. As if on cue, I heard footsteps approaching. Before I could retreat, Daniel rounded the corner. His gaze met mine, cold and calculating. His voice was casual, but the underlying tension was thick. "Hey, Ethan. Everything all right? What's for dinner?" I looked at him, my mind racing with fury, disbelief, and fear all at once. "Just checking the accounts," I said, voice even, but my hands shook as I set my phone down on the counter. Daniel's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, just enough for me to catch the tension, the fear. But he smiled, a forced, tight smile, and nodded. "You know, I think it's time we start getting our finances in order. For, emergencies." "Emergencies," I repeated quietly. His words hit me like a slap. I had no idea what he was planning. But I knew it had nothing to do with emergencies. This was much worse. The question was, how far had he gone? What was the end game? Daniel picked up his coffee, the steam rising in the dim light, his face blank. His calm demeanor was infuriating, a mask hiding something monstrous beneath. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the lies. It was everything. "Don't worry about it," he said, his voice smooth. Short-term investments. You know, some opportunities. Opportunities. He had been playing me all along, pretending everything was fine. But I saw the cracks now. This was something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. His hand rested on the counter, his fingers tapping rhythmically. I could see the subtle flicker in his eyes, the minuscule hesitation when I mentioned the bank accounts. He was lying, but why? And then it clicked. This wasn't just about me. This was about control. His grip on my mother. On everything. I needed proof. Real proof. I couldn't let this go on any longer. Right, I said flatly, swallowing my rising panic. I'll look into it. I turned away, my pulse hammering in my ears. But you'll need to explain a lot more than that. Just then, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't want to look at it, afraid of what it might reveal. But I had to. An anonymous text. It was short, simple, it's happening. They're both in on it. I froze. Everything I thought I knew about my family was unraveling. And I had no idea who was behind this. But someone else was pulling the strings, and it wasn't just Daniel. As I grabbed my coat and prepared to leave, the final gut-wrenching question kept haunting me: who could I trust? I didn't know it yet, but that night would mark the beginning of everything I had ever feared. And I couldn't stop it. The moment Daniel's words cut through the silence, I felt the world shift beneath me. Soon, she won't be a problem, he had whispered. I couldn't unhear it. Every word stuck in my mind like shards of glass, digging deeper with every passing second. He wasn't just planning to take control, he was preparing to make her disappear. And that was something I could never let happen. I stood frozen for a long moment after he left the kitchen. My stomach twisted as I processed the gravity of what I had just heard. My mother, my mom, had no idea. I had no idea how long this had been brewing, but now, it was as clear as day. Daniel wasn't going to just take away her freedom, he was preparing to lock her away, isolate her like some sort of burden he could dispose of. The house felt colder now. Everything seemed off, like I was being watched. I had to do something. I had to find proof before Daniel could carry out his plan. He was a master of manipulation, always pretending to be the caring husband, but underneath, he was calculating, cold. I moved quickly, pretending like I was going about my usual routine, but my mind was running a mile a minute. I headed to the study, the one place Daniel thought no one would ever dare snoop. The one place that hid all of his secrets. I sat at the desk, turning on the computer. The glow of the screen illuminated my face, and as I started rifling through folders, a sense of urgency gripped me. The financial records were neatly stacked, but they hid the truth in layers of complexity. I was no accountant, but I knew enough to understand the numbers. I quickly started sorting through the transactions. The first few were simple, bills paid, standard investments, but the more I dug, the more it didn't add up. Large sums of money had been moved from my mother's accounts into offshore accounts under his name. Thousands of dollars, siphoned off piece by piece, with no explanation. But it wasn't just that. I found something else buried deeper in the system. A forged signature. Daniel had transferred a significant portion of my mother's estate, her savings, into an account linked to his name. The paperwork wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. He'd been planning this for months, systematically stripping my mother of everything she had, and worse, he had the means to control her entirely. The walls of the room seemed to close in on me. I snapped the laptop shut, panic rising in my chest. The air felt too thick. I needed to confront him. But not yet. I couldn't do it without more proof. This was bigger than I had imagined, and the worst part was that I knew if I made a move too soon, it could cost my mother everything. I needed time. Time to get the money moved. Time to figure out a way to protect her. I quickly glanced at my phone. There was a message from an unknown number. I know what he's planning. I read it again. The message wasn't much, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. How did they know? And what else did they know? My instincts told me to act fast. I headed to the safe in the basement, where my mother kept the important documents, the ones that were actually worth something. My heart pounded as I reached the bottom of the stairs, and I pulled out the key. The metallic sound of the lock turning echoed in the otherwise quiet house. I held my breath as I opened the door, feeling like I was doing something I shouldn't. But the truth had already been laid bare, and I couldn't back down. Inside, the shelves were packed with paperwork, boxes, and old photographs. But I wasn't looking for the past, I was looking for the future. The future I had to protect. My hands shook as I rifled through the stacks of papers. Then I saw it. A thick envelope, marked with the name of Daniel's lawyer. It was sealed with red wax, the kind you see on official documents. I tore it open. A property transfer agreement. It was for the house. The one I grew up in. Daniel had already signed everything over to himself, with my mother's name forged on the line. There was no mistake. He had planned to take everything, including the house, leaving my mother destitute. I didn't know if I could do this. I didn't know how to stop him. But I had to. There was no turning back now. I grabbed the envelope, stuffing it into my bag. It was time to move quickly. I needed to contact the bank, make sure the transfers were frozen, get a lawyer, and figure out what to do with this evidence. As I turned to leave, I felt a sense of dread crawl up my spine. Something wasn't right. I stopped and turned back to the safe. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see that some of the papers had been moved. I hadn't touched them. I hadn't even been down here long enough for anyone to get to them. Someone had been here. Someone new. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my bag and rushed back upstairs. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel the house closing in on me. I had to act fast, or everything would be lost. Just as I was about to head for the door, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. Ethan, Daniel's voice came from behind me, calm but laced with an eerie authority. I know what you're doing. I froze. Do you? I turned slowly, trying to mask the panic in my chest. Why don't you sit down and we'll talk, huh, he said, his voice cold and confident, like he had everything under control. But his eyes, they gave it away. I could see it now, the mask slipping. The tension between us grew thick, like a string being pulled tighter, ready to snap. And I knew. This was it. He was about to make his move. I wasn't going to let him win. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized this was just the beginning. My heart was pounding as I stood face to face with Daniel in the hallway. The words he had spoken to me only moments ago, cold, calculated, echoed in my ears. I could hear the tension in his voice, but he was trying to mask it with a smooth, almost rehearsed calm. It was like he was waiting for me to make a mistake. And I wasn't about to give him that satisfaction. Ethan, relax. It's not like we can't talk this out, Daniel said, a thin smile stretching across his face. But there was nothing warm about it. His eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, told a different story. I wasn't buying it. You've been planning this for months, I said, my voice low but sharp. Don't act like you're still the good guy here. He didn't flinch. The calmness of his expression made my blood boil, but I knew better than to show weakness. The truth had already been revealed. He was hiding it, but I could see it now. Every move he'd made had been carefully orchestrated. His smirk deepened. I'm just looking out for your mother, Ethan, Daniel said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You're too young to understand what I'm doing. Sometimes, things have to get worse before they can get better. A chill ran through me. I had spent so long ignoring the little red flags, convincing myself that he wasn't as bad as he seemed. But now I knew. He'd been playing me all along. I turned my back, pretending to move towards the kitchen. In reality, I was calculating my next move. I had to find the evidence, something that would put an end to his games. I had to act quickly before he locked my mother away for good. But just as I took a step, the unmistakable sound of the back door creaking open hit my ears. The shed. That's where he planned to keep her. I froze. I had to get to her. I had to make sure she was safe before it was too late. But how was I supposed to get past him? He was a step ahead, always a step ahead. I moved silently toward the back door, each step calculated, my mind racing. If I could get to the shed before Daniel noticed, I might be able to stop him. I wasn't even sure how I was going to do it. But I couldn't leave her out there alone. Not like this. As I approached the door, I glanced through the crack in the frame, my breath caught in my throat. There was Daniel, standing by the shed with his back turned. He was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. I could barely make out the words, but I heard enough to know I was running out of time. "She's too stubborn," Daniel's voice hissed into the phone. "But I've made arrangements. She won't be a problem soon. It's just a matter of time." I gritted my teeth. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about taking her money or controlling her anymore. This was about eliminating her. I had to act. I shoved the door open quietly and slipped out into the yard. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, but I pushed forward, trying to ignore the dread that curled in my gut. There was only one thing left to do. I had to get my mother and get her out of this house, away from Daniel. The shed was closer now. A few more steps. Just as I reached the door, I heard the sound of Daniel's voice again, closer this time, louder. He was walking toward me. My heart stopped. I couldn't let him catch me. Not now. Not when I was so close. I turned on my heels, slipping into the shadows of the garden. My feet felt like lead as I ran, the gravel crunching beneath me. The shed. I had to reach it. But how was I going to get her out? Everything I thought I knew about my family, my life, had just shattered. The house I grew up in, the life I'd known, it was all a lie. And I couldn't let it go on. I slipped through the bushes, just in time to see Daniel turning the corner of the house. I had to get to my mother now. No more hesitation. No more second guessing. The shed door was locked, but I had the keys. I'd seen them in Daniel's drawer, hidden away, just like everything else. I pulled the keys from my pocket and inserted one into the lock, feeling the cold metal as I twisted it. A click. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was musty, stale. It smelled like dust and old wood. But there was my mother, curled up on the floor, her face pale and sickly. "Mom." I rushed to her side, her frail body barely moving as I knelt beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, I thought I saw confusion in her gaze. "Ethan," she whispered, barely audible. "What's going on? Why are we out here?" I helped her sit up, my mind spinning. I couldn't explain it all to her, not yet. But I knew one thing, Daniel's plan had to end now. Suddenly, a loud noise from behind me made me turn. Daniel was standing at the threshold of the shed, a dark shadow in the doorway. His eyes were cold, too cold. He had a smirk on his face, like he'd won. "I told you, Ethan," Daniel said, his voice chillingly calm. "You can't stop me." In that moment, the air felt heavy, suffocating. My mother clutched my arm, her fingers trembling. But as Daniel stepped forward, his smile growing, I realized something. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let him win. I could feel the weight of Daniel's eyes on me, his presence suffocating in the small shed. My mother's frail body trembled beside me as she struggled to stand, her face pale, barely a whisper of recognition in her eyes. She had no idea what was really happening, but I knew. The plans had been set in motion long before I'd ever realized the full extent of Daniel's control. "You're making a mistake, Ethan," Daniel said, his voice cool and deliberate, but there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface. He stepped closer, his tall frame casting a long shadow over both of us. "You can't stop me." I swallowed hard. My mind was racing, but I kept my voice steady. You think I'm just going to stand here and let you lock her away? I could hear the anger in my voice, rising with every word. You're wrong. The tension in the shed was suffocating. The dim light from a single bulb above flickered intermittently, casting strange, shifting shadows on the walls. It was like something out of a nightmare, the air thick with the scent of mildew, the silence broken only by our breathing and the distant hum of the house behind us. Daniel's eyes gleamed with a cold certainty. You've always been a disappointment, Ethan. But this, he paused, his lips curling into a smirk, this is for your own good. For everyone's good. You don't understand, but you will. I felt my stomach twist. I had never seen him like this before, so calm, so sure of himself. It was terrifying. But I had to stay focused. I couldn't let him intimidate me, not now. Not when everything was on the line. What do you mean for everyone's good? I asked, my voice low, like a predator circling its prey. I had to keep him talking. I had to keep him distracted while I figured out my next move. Daniel's smirk widened. I'm saving her from herself. She's weak. She doesn't know what's best for her, Ethan. You don't either. I've been handling everything for years. It's time she learns that. I felt a surge of rage. The audacity. To stand there and act like he was some kind of savior. This wasn't about saving anyone. This was about control. Don't you dare talk about her like that, I snapped, stepping forward. She's my mother, and I'll protect her. I'll do whatever it takes to get her out of here. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He was no longer smiling. He took a slow step toward me, closing the distance between us. You think you can protect her from me? You've always been weak, Ethan. Too soft. That's why she's in this mess in the first place. The insult hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. You won't get away with this. I'll expose everything. Daniel chuckled, a low, dark sound that made my skin crawl. Expose it? What are you going to do? Call the police? He scoffed. You're out of your depth, kid. I gritted my teeth, refusing to back down. I already have the proof, I said, pulling the envelope from my jacket pocket. The one with the forged documents. The property transfer agreement. I watched his face shift, his composure faltering for just a split second before he recovered, but it was enough. His jaw tightened. You think that's enough? You think anyone will believe you? He took another step closer, his tone darkening. You're a fool, Ethan. You really have no idea what you're dealing with. I felt my pulse quicken, but I held my ground. Maybe not. But I'm not the only one who knows the truth now. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps from behind us. My heart skipped a beat as I spun around, instinctively pulling my mother closer to me. A figure emerged from the shadows, one I hadn't expected. It was Sarah. I had no idea how she had found us, but there she was, standing in the doorway of the shed, her eyes wide with shock. She had been my mother's closest friend, the one person I trusted outside of my family. But now, she was standing there, looking like a deer caught in headlights. I didn't mean to interrupt, Sarah said, her voice shaking. But I thought I could help. Daniel turned to face her, his expression quickly shifting from cold to something much darker. You shouldn't be here, Sarah, he said, his voice low, menacing. You don't want to be part of this. Sarah hesitated, her gaze flickering between Daniel and me. I've been hearing things, she stammered. I couldn't just stand by. I couldn't let him do this to you, Ethan. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that she had come to help, but dread that she had unknowingly walked into the lion's den. She was playing with fire, and Daniel was a master at setting things ablaze. You really should have stayed away, Daniel said, his eyes narrowing. You're just as much a part of the problem as anyone else. The tension in the shed skyrocketed, the atmosphere crackling with impending violence. I could feel the walls closing in on us, the air thick with secrets and lies. This wasn't just about my mother anymore, it was about everything I had ever believed, everything I thought I knew about my family. And now, Sarah was caught in the middle of it. I don't care what you say, Sarah shot back, her voice gaining strength. I'm not going to let you destroy Ethan or his mother. You've been pulling the strings for far too long, Daniel. I know what you've done. I'm going to make sure it all comes out. I couldn't believe it. I never thought Sarah would take a stand against Daniel. But I knew this was the break I needed. This was the chance to end everything, to expose Daniel for who he really was. But I could see the storm in Daniel's eyes. He was planning his next move, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. And I knew that whatever came next would change everything. You think you can stop me? Daniel's voice was a cold whisper, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. You don't know the danger you're in. I locked eyes with Sarah, my heart pounding. It was too late to turn back now. We had made our move, and now we were all in danger. This was just the beginning. I stood frozen in the shed, the dim light flickering like the last breath of a dying flame. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears, and every breath I took felt like a struggle. My mother's hand was gripping mine so tightly that I could feel the bones pressing against my skin. Her frail form trembled against me, but it wasn't just fear, there was something else, something darker in her eyes. She wasn't just scared. She was confused, lost in a fog of manipulation she didn't fully understand. But I did. And I wasn't going to let it happen. Daniel stood in the doorway, the shadow of his presence too heavy for me to ignore. His smile, cold, calculating, was a mask he wore every day. But today, the mask was slipping. Today, I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to let him twist it any longer. He stepped inside, slow and measured, as if every movement was a deliberate step in a game I hadn't been invited to play. But I wasn't a pawn. I was the one holding the cards now. You're making a mistake, Ethan, he said again, his voice smooth, but the venom in his words was palpable. You don't know what you're up against. I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. I know exactly what you're up to, Daniel. I've been watching. I've been listening. And I won't let you take her. He smirked, that same mocking look that had made me hate him for years. You think you can stop me with a few papers and a folder? You think you have the power to change anything? I clenched my fists. I have more than that. And I'm not afraid to use it. A flicker of something, doubt, crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. He was the master manipulator. He would never let his guard slip for long. I had to keep pushing. You're right about one thing, I said, stepping closer. I don't know everything about you, but I do know this, you're a coward. Hiding behind lies, behind her. You're scared of facing the truth. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. You don't know anything about me. And I'm about to learn everything, I shot back, feeling the tension in the air grow thicker, like an electric current buzzing between us. For a moment, there was silence. But it wasn't a peaceful kind of silence, it was the kind that came before a storm. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was the breaking point. You don't know who you're dealing with, Ethan, Daniel said, his voice suddenly low, dangerous. You really think I won't destroy you? My mind raced, but I didn't show it. If he thought he could intimidate me, he was wrong. You've already destroyed yourself, Daniel. You just don't know it yet. A faint, unsettling laugh escaped his lips. You're delusional. He took a step toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. I've already won. You're too late. My heart dropped into my stomach, the words hitting me harder than I expected. For a split second, I doubted myself. Was I too late? Had he already moved the money? Had he already buried everything I was trying to expose? No. I refused to believe that. I couldn't. Not after everything I'd seen, everything I knew. He might have been 2 steps ahead before, but now. Now, I was playing the game on my terms. I glanced at Sarah, still standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with fear but also resolve. She wasn't backing down either. "He's lying, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "He's been lying to everyone for years." Daniel's gaze snapped to her, his eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about." Sarah took a deep breath, her voice gaining strength. "I know enough. I know he's been stealing from you, manipulating your mother, and I'm not going to let him get away with it." The tension in the shed intensified, thick and suffocating. My mind raced. We couldn't just stand there and talk. I needed to get my mother out of the shed. I needed to get us all away from Daniel, out of his reach. "Get her out of here, Ethan," Sarah whispered, nodding toward my mother. "I'll handle this." I hesitated. There was so much to process, so much to figure out. But one thing was clear: if we didn't act now, we would lose everything. I pulled my mother to her feet, the weight of her frail body dragging me down, but I didn't care. She had to get out of here. Daniel watched us, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His gaze flickered to the papers in my hand, and I saw the briefest hint of panic cross his face before he quickly masked it. "Leave," Daniel spat, his voice venomous. "You think you can stop this? You'll regret it." But it was too late. I was already walking toward the door, my mother in tow, every step heavy with the knowledge that we were on the verge of something bigger than I could fully comprehend. We reached the door, but as I reached for the handle, the unmistakable sound of a phone ringing cut through the tension. It wasn't mine. My heart dropped. It was his. I glanced back at Daniel, who was staring at the phone with wide eyes, his hand twitching toward it as if he didn't want to answer. But he did. He picked it up slowly, almost reluctantly. "Yes?" His voice was strained. He was trying to keep his composure, but there was a tremor in it now. I knew then that something had shifted. The conversation was brief, but I could hear snippets of it through the air, words like plan and change of course. Daniel's voice became even lower, his tone suddenly filled with urgency. I could see it. The mask was slipping. Something was wrong. And then, before I could process it fully, Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto mine. "Get out," he hissed, his voice shaking. "This isn't over." And for the first time since this all began, I finally understood. He wasn't just trying to lock my mother away. He was preparing for something bigger. We had no time left. I stood there, my heart hammering in my chest, the air thick with tension. The door to the shed creaked as it swung closed behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly alone with my thoughts. My mother was safe now, hidden from Daniel's twisted plans. But there was still so much to unravel. Still so many questions hanging in the air. We had only a few minutes before Daniel figured out we were gone. And when he did, everything would shift. The calm I had felt when I first saw Sarah standing there, ready to help, was now giving way to something darker. Something I couldn't quite put into words. I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. As we hurried to the car, my mother's frail hand resting in mine, I heard Sarah's voice behind me. "Ethan," she called, urgency in her voice. "I found something." I stopped dead in my tracks, every muscle in my body tensing. What more could there be? What else had Daniel done? She held up an envelope, thin, but undeniably important. I could see the smudge of ink on the seal, the hurried handwriting. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was evidence. More proof of his manipulation. "Don't open it here," I said quickly, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting Daniel to appear out of the shadows. "We need to get out of here first." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "But it's a letter, Ethan. From the bank. I don't think he's just been taking money. He's been laundering it." My stomach dropped. I had suspected that something larger was at play, but to hear it so plainly, to have it confirmed, it hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just about my mother anymore. This was about everything Daniel had built, a life of lies and deceit, and I had a front row seat to watch it all fall apart. The drive to Sarah's house was quiet. My mother sat in the back, her face pale, eyes unfocused. The car hummed on the road, the only sound the soft click of the turn signal and the occasional creak of the wheel. My mind raced with possibilities, with what-ifs and maybes, but nothing felt like it could prepare me for what was coming. Sarah handed me the envelope once we were inside, her hands trembling slightly. I took it, the weight of it suddenly feeling like a burden, a responsibility I hadn't asked for. I broke the seal, and as I read the letter, a new wave of fury rose in me. Daniel had been hiding a second account, one I didn't know about. And the money had been transferred there, in large amounts, over the last year. Not just the small withdrawals I had noticed before, but significant sums, all funneled into an offshore account. He's been planning this for longer than we thought, I muttered under my breath, the realization setting in like a cold stone in my stomach. He knew exactly what he was doing. And I was blind to it. Sarah's voice was quiet but resolute. It's not too late. We still have time. She was right. But the question now was, what do we do with this information? And how much was I willing to risk to expose it all? I could hear Daniel's voice echoing in my head. You'll regret this. It was a threat. But it wasn't just a threat about what he'd do to me, it was about what he had planned all along. He'd been working with people I didn't know, people I couldn't track, and now the stakes were higher than I ever could have imagined. Call the police, I said, my voice firm, despite the growing sense of dread creeping up my spine. We need to bring everything to light before he does something worse. Sarah nodded, pulling out her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed. I turned back to the letter in my hand, scanning the details once more. This wasn't just about the money. It was about power. Control. And it was about to come crashing down on him. The phone call was brief, but it didn't feel like enough. I wanted more. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. As Sarah ended the call, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching gravel outside. Someone was here. I didn't have time to panic, but I could feel the heat in my chest rising as I turned toward the door. This is it. I rushed to the window, peeking through the blinds. It was him. Daniel. His car parked out front, the engine still running. He was here. But something was wrong. There was no movement. He was just sitting there, watching the house. Waiting. I had to act fast. I grabbed the phone, dialing the number for the police once more, my voice calm but urgent. It's him, I said. He's here. I need backup. Now. Stay inside, the officer on the other end said. We're on our way. I didn't have time to wait. My mind raced, calculating every possible outcome. Could I leave? Could we escape while he was distracted? I glanced at Sarah, and she understood immediately. We have to make sure he doesn't get away, I said, urgency creeping into my voice. Come on, we'll go out the back. I'll take care of it. Get my mom to safety. She didn't hesitate. I could see it in her eyes, the resolve. The same fierce determination that had kept us going through everything. We moved quickly, quietly, through the house and out the back door. We had one chance to make it count. The tension hung thick in the air. The sound of footsteps following us sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't afford to look back. Every move I made now was critical. I could hear the sirens wailing in the distance, but they wouldn't get here in time. Not before Daniel made his move. The door to the shed creaked open again behind me. And there he was. Don't do this, I said, my voice steady but my pulse pounding. It's over, Daniel. For the first time, I saw him falter. His eyes flashed with panic, and for a second, he looked human again, not the monster I had feared for so long. He was cornered. But even as he took a step back, I knew he wasn't finished. Not yet. As I stepped closer, I realized that the battle wasn't about saving my mother anymore, it was about saving myself. And I was ready. Ready to face whatever came next. I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I had finally taken control. And I wasn't going to let him destroy me.